Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Western Arctic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise on this bill, Bill C-3. It's one of many bills that I'm sure is going to be in front of our Transport Committee with a hard-working minister like we have in charge of that. One that perhaps is more hard-working than hard-thinking on many issues, but that certainly says as all opposition critics are responsible to make sure that the minister does think, and does think in a reasonable fashion about the bills that are in front of them. And hard work does not replace smart thinking. So I'll go on from there to say that this bill is an interesting bill. It has merit within it. It comes out of quite a bit of work that's been directed towards the Arctic and the northern waters by the Conservative government. For instance, we could talk about the Cabinet's trip to Inuvik last August when they took the time to visit my riding, the entire Cabinet, the Prime Minister as well, and they certainly excited the population there with the thought that there was going to be some announcements of some significance there. But once, what we did see coming from that trip to Inuvik and the trip to Tuktoyaktuk by the Prime Minister was the announcement of the name of an icebreaker that was going to be built a number of years later. People in Tuktoyaktuk, of course, who live on the Arctic coast and who are experiencing the ravages of climate change on their own communities, the degradation of the actual community washing away into the sea, were hoping for something a little more. They were hoping for a land connection to Inuvik, tying them into a highway system which would allow them some additional economic development, would perhaps make it more life easier for them on the coast there. But they didn't get it. The Prime Minister made a very simply a release that really had no content to it as well. When he spoke in Inuvik, the Prime Minister announced that they were going to now make a mandatory registration of ships in Arctic waters, something that we in the Democratic Party had been asking for the last 2 years. I think it was a good thing to do that, but it certainly wasn't what the people of the North were looking for. And is this bill that's in front of us now what the people of Canada are looking for in terms of Arctic waters protection? It does extend the boundaries, Mr. Speaker, and that is a good thing. But does it create any more protection for the Arctic, or is it simply another gesture on the part of the Conservative Party towards our deepening interest in the Arctic? The Canadian Arctic waters are fast changing. The conditions of the sea that is now being not covered with ice in the Beaufort area up through the Arctic Islands the condition is getting worse. Larger storms, more severe storms. There are much more hazards to navigation now than there were in years past when the Arctic ice was over the water for longer periods of time. The permanent ice pack was further south from the pole. Those things have changed, and now we're in a situation where we have very, very massive weather disturbances in the area, and that causes extreme problems. So this bill will deal with Arctic transportation in difficult and changing times. But we're allowed to do this under the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention. This is part of practice that I'm sure the rest of the world will be happy to see us do. But once again, we don't see something with this bill, some indication of where we're going with the ability to protect the Arctic. We also have current disputes in much of our Arctic waters. How is this bill going to impact on our current dispute over a very large chunk of the Beaufort Sea between the United States and Canada? Who's going to be responsible for those waters? Where is the diplomatic effort to solve this issue that's been in place since 1983? Where is the effort to come to a conclusion with the United States about the nature of the delineation of the line between Alaska and the Yukon? Increasing the size of the area under protection in the Arctic is meaningless unless there's an increased effort on enforcement. But enforcement, Mr. Speaker, is difficult in the Arctic. It's expensive. It requires a kind of effort that I don't see our government ready to put in yet. But there is a pathway there to protect the Arctic waters, and that's through international diplomacy. Mr. Speaker, I had the chance to travel to Aleutian last year and to see the foreign ministers of the major Arctic nations there agreeing to a treaty on the UN law of the sea applying to the boundaries between countries. The one foreign minister that wasn't there at this gathering was the minister from Canada. He was replaced by the Minister for Natural Resources. We are not taking an active role in diplomacy. We are not putting diplomacy up front. Our Prime Minister is putting an aggressive confrontational attitude out front rather than one where we speak to international cooperation and diplomacy as the way to solve some of the issues that are facing us. We need compliance on international treaties. We need a working relationship of the highest order between the Arctic nations to accomplish our goals in protecting our Arctic environment. There is no question of that. That should be the strategy, the number one element in the Canadian strategy in dealing with the Arctic. We need Arctic search and rescue. The other countries are talking about Arctic search and rescue, even between the U.S. and Russia. There are agreements being formed to protect the Bering Strait, to work on those aspects of cooperative efforts that they can put into dealing with the problems that are inherent in shipping in hazardous waters. We should be doing the same thing with the United States. In fact, at a lower level in our system, we have no choice but to do that. We need the effort at the top end through our highest officials in this country to stress the importance of international diplomacy. You know, when it comes to protecting the Arctic, we need not only mandatory registration of shipping, but we need to accept the international maritime organizations' regulations for shipping in Arctic waters. We need to make that an international fact that ships that traverse the Arctic waters all have the same level of regulation. The kinds of hulls that they use, the kinds of equipment that's used on the ships to protect the environment, to protect the ships themselves, and to ensure that the kinds of ships that are going to be more and more entering the Arctic have the correct and the best technology that is available for this type of work. So we need those types of international agreements as well. It's not, the Arctic is not a place where defense and aggressive military action is going to solve our problems. We're not going to solve our problems with the United States over the Northwest Passage, over the Beaufort Sea, by getting into military confrontations. There is only one way that we'll deal with these problems with the United States. That's through diplomacy. That's through the actions of our government in concert with the U.S. government in coming up with agreements. Those are the only directions that there is any hope for getting ourselves solid on those issues. You know, there's an international report on shipping that's coming out very, very shortly on the use of Arctic waters. It's been co-authored by a number of countries, and we're expecting that out in the next year. This document can be the basis of building an understanding among Arctic nations about how to deal with Arctic waters, how to protect Arctic waters, what to expect with the development of fishing, with the development of mineral exploration, with oil and gas, with tourism. My goodness, the increase in the cruise ship passages in Arctic waters is astounding. So all these things are coming together, and the international community is working on them right now. What Canada has to do is take back the lead on international diplomacy, work with these countries, work to come up with solutions that can deliver us an Arctic policy in conjunction with the rest of the world that will protect our Arctic and will make our 200-mile Environmental Protection Act a working document. You know, this government has many ideas about the Arctic. Unfortunately, some of them are simply ideas that come out of their heads and rather than out of a consensus-building process that is needed for Arctic conditions. I'd like to take the example of Arctic research. Canada's just announced a major research facility will be built in Nunavut. This is kind of contrary to what Arctic researchers are after. When we had the report from a group of Arctic researchers who were commissioned by the federal government to make a report on where a research center should be, what it should encompass, what they came back and said is that we don't need a report on that. We need a report on the Arctic research initiatives required. In other words, we don't need facilities. We need a plan for Arctic research that can allow our scientists to deliver the information that we need to protect our Arctic, to understand the changes that are going on with it. That should be the first priority of this government, not building facilities. In the Arctic right now, we have facilities for researchers in our territories. They're reasonably well used, but they're used in a different sense than what the government's looking for. These facilities are used by researchers as home bases to extend their research out into the Arctic regions. The idea of a fixed center for Arctic research is really an anathema to most researchers who are looking for linkages throughout the Arctic for the type of research that they do.